Hello everyone, today we're going to learn daily Tanya for Kaf El Tafshin Pei Daled. So I'm just going to start today off by saying that Kaf El is the day of the creation of light. It is the day of the first day of creation, right? According to tradition, Aleph Tishrei is the day of the creation of man. So you wind back, 5 days and you're at Kaf El. So this is the day of the creation of light and therefore of darkness as well. And so today is the day of the beginning, and today we're beginning also a new chapter in Igeres HaKodesh. Chapter Yutes, letter Yutes. It is the 19th section of Igeres HaKodesh. And now let's start learning it together. Aite Arka Salma. Okay, so this is a pasuk from Tehillim, and it describes God as somebody who is clothed in light like a garment. Okay, so he starts off with a pasuk, and he's going to explain it. We see in a book called Likutei Torah from the Arizal, not to be confused with Likutei Torah by the Alter Rebbe, Parashat Kitisa and Parashat Vayikra, both in Parashat Kitisa and Parashat Vayikra, כתב כי השגת משה רבנו לא הייתה בבחינת פנימיות דחוכמה עילה נקראת עבודת צילות. So he wrote that Moshe Rabbeinu's level of understanding did not reach the pneumius, the sort of internal, intimate sort of understanding of Chachma Law, of the high wisdom, right? What we call these sort of almost a musical, almost aesthetic quality that wisdom has, the sort of internal coherence that makes sense, right? When you see something that makes sense, there's an aesthetic, almost musical dimension to that. One can argue, and so that might be what we're referring to when we talk about Chochmah Ilah. Okay, but that might be sort of the external parts of that, whereas the internal parts of that would be something beyond that, something sort of more core to what Chochmah, what wisdom really means. He's saying Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding didn't approach the most internal, intimate part of Chochmah Ilah, which is also called Abba Atzilus. It's called the Father in Atzilus, in sort of eminence. וכמו שכתוב וכל שכן, בספירת הכתר שלמעלה ממנה נקראת אריך אנפין. Okay, so he's saying, and if Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding didn't approach the depths, the internal, intimate nature of Chochmah Datzilus, which is the sort of coherence and wisdom, it certainly did not approach God's will, which is known as Arich Anpin. So a little bit difficult to translate. So we're going to stick with Arich Anpin because it doesn't really matter what that means, literally. Okay, however, Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding of Chochmah, of this sort of wisdom, this coherence, this divine wisdom, came through sort of what is called at the back of Chochmah, Hamilubeshet Bebina, right, which is sort of clothed in Bina, Hamitlabeshet B'Shiva Sfirot Tachtonot, which is in turn clothed in the 7 lower spheres, Shedikrot Zeir Anpin, Sod HaTorah, which is the secret of Torah. ומתפשטת עד סוף 4 ספירות התחתונות, and it therefore spreads out to the 4 lower spheres, שהן נצח הוד יסוד מלכות, which are Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. So let's go through these steps one by one and kind of try to explain them as best we can, because we're obviously talking about what Moshe Rabbeinu can and cannot understand. So, we are obviously not anywhere near that level, but we're going to try to at least kind of understand what kinds of things we might be talking about here. So, this sort of internal, again, musical coherence, but sort of the depths of even that is not something that was sort of fully grasped by Moshe Rabbeinu. The way it was grasped is by sort of not not it itself, but sort of the impressions that it makes when you kind of elaborate out these sort of different possible permutations that this wisdom can, in which can express itself. Things, something like music, something like aesthetics, something like mathematics. Um, this wouldn't be, again, we're talking even more abstract than this. We're saying sort of Moshe Rabbeinu, we might say, didn't, at least the way we're explaining it now, that the Arizal is saying he didn't grasp the internal coherence itself. He grasped the coherence by grasping things that have this coherence. Sort of abstract understanding that sort of display this coherence, right? We don't know what beauty is, but we can see we can know what is beautiful and what isn't. We don't know what truth is, but we can know, when something is true and when it's not, and so on and so on. And sort of, so that's in the more abstract way, and then it goes down again to Zeir being to the 7 traits. Now, what might that mean? Well, hard to say. Again, we're speaking on levels that we couldn't possibly understand, but it might mean something like, again, you start at this almost ineffable essence of wisdom, which is observed in the kind of coherence of different things that we can see. And then there's sort of another level of concretization, where it's not that these things display it directly, but they display it through a kind of interaction. Okay, so that's more of a kind of musical thing. It's not like you could imagine somebody kind of looking at a square and kind of grasping, you know, the coherence of it. Oh, it's a square. Okay, that's what it is. And then you can sort of imagine that somebody's not seeing the square, but he's seeing each side and he's seeing how it interacts with the other sides. He's seeing the right angles, he's seeing the mathematical equations, and through that, he's grasping a sort of deep coherence that this square has in being a square. It might be something like that. And again, this permutes down to the way that God relates to the world. Okay, so then again, rather than just being kind of squares and abstract sort of ideas, it sort of comes down into a relationship that God has with the world. In other words, he's not observing mere forms, he's observing this beauty, this coherence in God's plan for the world and the way he's interacting with it. And then again, we get to Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus. And Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus, we say, V'sham haita hasagat nevuato b'vchinat pnimiut. So in Netzach Hod Yesod and Malchus, which we'll explain in a minute, Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding, his grasp was of the internal essence of Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus. It wasn't mediated by anything else. It wasn't mediated by example. It wasn't mediated by relationship. It was a direct sort of imbibing, a direct. It was concrete within Moshe Rabbeinu's being itself, himself as a person. He was able to sort of concretize that and truly understand it, and sort of live it out, as it were. Okay, so what are Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus? Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus are, so Netzach Hod Yesod are the 3 lowest, the lower, I guess, spheres in Zeir and Pin. In other words, when we talk about God's traits, his 6 traits, then Netzach Hod and Yesod are the lower 3. They deal with they're more human in nature. They deal with the relation to the absolute. Whereas Netzach is a kind of wanting to overcome that which stands between man and the absolute, between man and God as the absolute. Okay, Hod is more about the sort of confronting the distance between man and the absolute in humility and awe. Okay, so there's sort of, if you will, love of God and awe of God, right? So they're chesed and gvura, but they're brought already one step down. They're almost sort of mirrored back uh, at God from a more human perspective. Now, they're still divine traits. I would need to understand exactly what that might mean, but I can explain them from the human perspective. So that's what I'm trying to do. And so that's Netzach and Haid. Yesod is, if you will, again, grasping that musical quality from Chochmah, right, that filters down through these things and sort of mediates the relationship of when we try to break away from the contingent and go toward the absolute, and when we just stand in awe and humility of the absolute and recognize our distance from it. That's Yesod, that's the tzaddik, that's the righteous man, the righteous ruler, and so on and so on. And then there's Malchus, which is the revelation outwards of all these things. So we could say in these four places, in these four traits, we can say that Moshe Rabbeinu fully sort of grasped them. But again, we're going to reiterate this. But above Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus, as we explained, he did not have any sort of grasp of the internal nature of it. But as we said, only through the back of Chochmah, right? This sort of mediated Chochmah HaMelubeshet Bebina, which is clothed in Bina, HaMelubeshet Toch Pnimiyut, sorry, HaMelubeshet מתפשטת תוך פנימיות דנצח Hod Yesod Malchut, right, which sort of then is mediated and then is sort of poured into Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus. בסוד נובלות חוכמה שלמעלה, תורה שהיא בבחינת זעיר אנפין. Right, this is the sort of Novlos Chochma, right? This is a common Zoharic term, right? So we're saying that the Torah is, if you will, the downpouring of the high wisdom, right? Which is the Torah that comes from Zeir and Pin, right? The three lower aspects of Zeir and Pin, of the divine traits. Right? And as it is written, you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. Ayin Sham. See there? So see where we said above, right? Parshas Kitisa and in Vayikra. And see in Shara Nevuah, which is another book by the Arizal as well. And this ought to send you into an uproar. If you're a fan of Moshe Rabbeinu, as I am, you'd probably be very offended by this. And the Alter Rebbe shares your consternation. He says, "V'lachari yesh lafli." Right? One must wonder at this. And he said, and no prophet in Israel arose like Moshe. But how can we say, how could the Arizal say that he was able to grasp more? He was able to speak and to pontificate on sort of realms that are far higher than even Keter Datzilus, which you said in the beginning is the sort of pure will of God that is even above wisdom, that is even above coherence itself. It's something completely inaccessible. We said even to Moshe Rabbeinu, yet the Arizal was able to speak on this. So we're sort of left with a mystery here, which hopefully we'll unravel tomorrow together. So stay tuned. Take care.